I'd like to introduce Mike Muir, who has been working with educators to improve learning for all students for almost 30 years. He is a faculty member at the University of Maine at Farmington and director of the Maine Center for Meaningful and Engaged Learning. Mike is the current president for the Association of Middle Level Education and is active in ISTE, the International Society for Technology in Education, which is the parent organization of ICE as well. Mike is the multiple pathways leader for the Auburn School Development in Auburn, Maine, and where he supports the district's large-scale school change initiatives. Please welcome to the stage Mike Muir.
Thanks, Hank. So I thank you so much for inviting me here. I'm really excited, but I have to admit I'm still a little kind of shaken up. First thing this morning, Lucy sends me this post about 10 things you're not supposed to say. You don't believe how much time I had to go back and redo my session. And then I got here, and there's all these red shirts. And if any of you watch Star Trek, you know what happens to the red shirts you've never met before. So I'm a little worried, but we'll see how we can make out here, all right? So we're all here because we really believe that technology is great. But I worry a little bit. I've been involved with technology for a long time. Is technology being great really sufficient? Is that enough? And I'm in Maine. I've been part of MLTI, the first and I think still only one-to-one laptop initiative statewide anywhere for 13 years. And people always come to us and they say, does technology improve learning? And we thought long and hard about that answer. And when we look at all the research that we've done, when we look at 13 years of experience, we've come to the conclusion that we can say enthusiastically, no, it doesn't improve learning. So that's it. That's all I've got for you. I think we've got about... So what can we do? What can we talk about in that time? So I have this Chicago connection. Some of you may know that I grew up in Hinsdale. I spent 11 years in Hinsdale. I haven't been back for a very long time. I Googled, I found the Lane School, which was my old elementary school. I found Hinsdale Middle School. I was actually the class that was one grade in the old school, and over the summer helped. So much better now. I've been through a 12-step. I've got the gene, which means I can do math, but I have zero passion for it. And a couple summers ago, I spent about 3.5 weeks writing letters of apology to my first sets of kids. I've also been a middle school technology integrator. We were one of the first integrators. We threw out this separate computer course. This was back in the days when you had to teach kids how to turn on a machine and how to word process. Most of our kids had never even used a computer before. There was no internet in my classroom. There were people in my district that were all excited that we could put in a printer network in my room, and I thought, okay. They wanted to use that network in the room so kids could communicate. And I'm like, they're right across the room from each other. And then I've had the opportunity to be a teacher educator at the University of Maine at Farmington. I'm still affiliated with them. And then I had a really great opportunity to work with a private educational developer doing schools to motivate kids. We wrote Philly's Magnet School Grant and supported it for 3 years. We did a career academy in Buffalo. We did a statewide project-based virtual program in Maine where kids could get credit for designing and doing standards-based projects. And so I've been really lucky over the years to work with some really great people. Nowhere is that more true than my current job as Multiple Pathways Director in Auburn, Maine. Auburn is, anywhere else it would be a town. In Maine, it's a small city. We've got a population of about 23,000. We're on a river, so we've got a rich manufacturing history, bricks and shoes. And we also have a big migrant population. In the past, it's been Irish and French Canadian. Now it's Somali. So it's a really rich, diverse community. Some of you are going to laugh. Our school system serves a total of 3,600 kids. When I moved to Maine, somebody said, Mike, you'll be so excited you're going to a really big high school. There's about 700 kids. And I said, I had 700 kids in my class back in Hinsdale. But I think one of the reasons Maine does so many wonderful things is because we've got this smaller scale. And we have this really rich history in Auburn of being involved in innovative projects. Auburn was actually one of the 9 exploration sites for the Maine Learning Technology Initiative. So they were up and running about a half year ahead of everybody else. The exploration sites is where the state worked out a lot of the bugs in the program, and it was a place where people could go see it in action before they got all the stuff themselves. We were one of the early adopters of bringing it into the high school as well, so we've been doing that for about 9 years. And this past year, they renewed the contract, and for the first time, districts were given choice. And so we went with iPads in 7 through 12, coming off of MacBooks for about 12 years. And we did that partly because in our primary grades, we've had iPads. In fact, our Advantage 2014 program, we think we were the first district in the country to go one-to-one iPads in kindergarten 3 years ago. And right now, we're one-to-one iPads K2. We'll be adding 3rd grade next year, but with some really amazing results. The primary grades program is recognized as an Apple Distinguished Program. We feel very honored about that. And our district isn't just involved in a lot of technology. In fact, we think of technology as just a slice of one of our larger initiatives, which is around customized learning. And customized learning is around updating and shifting school structures to recognize that kids learn in different time frames and in different ways. And it's not just about making sure that there's independent pace in the classroom. It's also about making sure that it's engaging and that kids want to come to school every day. So we were one of the founding districts of the Maine cohort for customized learning. There's now about 29 different districts around the state. That may not sound like a lot for Illinois, but we represent over 40% of the students in the state of Maine working on this. And there's other districts that are doing their own version. We have a new bill. Our 2018 graduates have to graduate with a performance-based diploma, not a credit-based diploma. And some of you who are doing this work also may know Bea McGarvey. She's one of the co-authors of Inevitable, and we're very fortunate to work with her. And so Auburn is doing all this great work, and I've worked a lot of great places, and I've worked everywhere I've been. There's been like a couple of really awesome people that you work with. I've never been anywhere like Auburn where we have a ton of really fabulous people, where everyone from central office to building administration to classroom teachers have great ideas and put them into place and do this fabulous work. And in fact, I saw this sign on Facebook recently that with great affection made me think of my colleagues. We have a lot of fun, we play hard, we do a lot of inventing, and it's a great place to work. So some people would say that because of these experiences, Mike might be an expert. But how many of you know the definition of an expert? Because a definition of an expert is someone who's made all possible mistakes. So if we're an expert and if we're doing great stuff, it's because we've made a lot of mistakes, done a lot of adjusting, learned from it. It's not like one day we all woke up brilliant and just implemented it perfectly the first time. So becoming an expert is a lot about being willing to make mistakes. So what about technology? Because frankly, we're getting a lot of mixed messages about tech. You know, everything from kids are distracted, so should we just ban it? Or it already is in their lives, could we leverage it to motivate them? Or we spend a lot of money on it, how can we really leverage it? Or gee, we've spent a lot of money on it and things aren't going that well, what should we do? So we've got a lot of mixed messages about it. And even within those mixed messages, we keep coming back to the fact that clearly it's already a huge piece of kids' lives. So what do we do? So let me go back to that question about that we get all the time in Maine, does technology improve learning? And our answer is still no. But it's no because we have a really firm belief that only teachers improve learning. Only teachers improve learning. And here's where the technology comes in, because we think technology is a pretty great tool for teachers. Or more specifically, we think technology is a really great tool for students guided by teachers. And so that's what we're going to be talking about today. In fact, I am a little concerned. I'm concerned because most of our kids already own this kind of learning. And even when you start working with kids of poverty, we're starting to find that more and more of them have access to smartphones and have more access to technology than we thought. Now, granted, our kids of poverty, our most disadvantaged kids, are not as far along with this kind of learning as our middle SES and upper SES kids are. And I'm a little concerned because the question, how is technology changing schools, a question we hear a lot in the press, we hear it on the blogosphere, we hear it in Twitter, is totally the wrong question. The question's not, how is technology changing schools? The question is, how has technology already changed learning? But that's not even the really important question. The really important question is, how will schools respond? Or will they at all? And I'm really worried because if we don't respond, if we choose not to respond to how learning has changed for these kids, we risk becoming irrelevant. How many of you are already experiencing that, where you feel like some of your kids think it doesn't matter that they're at school? And it doesn't matter that they have you as your teacher. And I know the truth. Most of you are like this lady right here and just smiling because you're overwhelmed. That's up, who's smiling because they're overwhelmed. Yeah, there we go. All right. So in truth, what we need is we need an empowerment model. Right? And let me talk a little bit about that. When I think about the traditional model of how we implement new ideas, is we go to the workshop and someone comes in and says, Mike, if you just do these 5 or 6 things, go back to your room, do these 5 or 6 things, you'll do great. And I'm going to call it a compliance model. I don't mean it in a negative way, but if you think about it, it's a just do what I say model, right? And it's not about being authoritarian. It really is from a helpful place, but it's a compliance model. Go and follow these established routines and procedures and you'll be okay. But we're not there anymore. We need an empowerment model, and an empowerment model requires all of us, to go out and invent and problem solve and do continuous improvement. And those are a different set of skills than we're used to. And it's going to require us to think differently. Well, gee, Mike, why do we need this? Because frankly, the compliance model is a lot easier, and I'm busy. Unlike the people who organize this conference, I like spending time with my family. So why do we need to experience this ourselves? One reason is that we need this because we haven't experienced this ourselves. As I look across the room, there's not a lot of you that grew up with high levels of access to technology in your elementary, middle, and high school years. And if we haven't experienced ourselves, we have a lot to learn. And if you want evidence of that, look at this modern classroom. And look at how similar it is to this not-so-modern classroom. So this is why we need it. And also, technology skills are not the same as technology integration skills. You can use your own personal tech really well, doesn't mean you know how to create good learning experiences with kids. That's not a criticism. It's recognizing why we need something bigger and better and more powerful. And frankly, schools do a pretty good job at doing school without technology. So if we're just going to bring in technology and not do anything different, why have we invested? We really need to think, what's the value added? What's the reason that we're bringing in more tech? Now, getting there, we can use models like Pindadora's SAMR model, and we can start thinking about moving through substitution and augmentation and on up to transformation. But frankly, how do you do that? The model's really good at helping me identify activities that are at different levels. But how do I move it to the next level? This is part of why we need an empowerment model. So when I say empowerment model, here are some of the things that I think we need to put in place. Now, some of these may sound like it's some of the same pieces that you have in the compliance model, but when we talk about each of these, I think you'll start to go, oh, I see how that's different. Oh, I see how that's different. So we're going to be talking about a focus on learning and leadership and communicating with the community and how you really protect stuff and about professional development. So let's start with focusing on the learning. Probably the most important thing is that it's about recognizing that this is about focusing on the learning, not the stuff. And it's really hard because most of us in this room are enthusiastic about this stuff. But I'm going to argue, and you'll see what I mean later, it's not really the stuff you're excited about. So when we talk about why do we use these devices, or how can we use them, or how will we leverage them, it's really easy for us to go straight to the tools, apps and word processing and social media and communications and video and projects and things like that. But there's this whole thing about the power of technology is not about learning to use the technology. It's about using the technology to learn. That's where the real power is. No teacher ever said, I love this marker. I'm going to build a lesson around this marker. All of my kids need to learn to use this marker. And yet we do that with technology. Now granted, I find my iPads and iPhone a lot more interesting than I do my markers. But you get the point. Early in MLTI, we did a lot of planning for the professional development, and we were talking about what should those trainings be about. And we had a big debate, and a great metaphor for the debate was we had an actual conversation about we should do a module on spreadsheets. Every teacher should learn how to do spreadsheets. And we said, no, you're completely wrong. What you need is you need a workshop on how to collect and analyze data and teach it in such a way that everyone leaves knowing how to use a spreadsheet, but it's a workshop on analyzing data. And one of the interesting things is since we had that conversation 14 years ago, the research has come back and said when teachers get workshops on the tools, they go back and teach the kids tools. When teachers get workshops on important content and skills that leverage the tools, they go back and teach the important content and skills. So we got to think less about spreadsheets and more about analyzing data. Or simply put, it's not the tools, it's what you can do with them. And that should become our mantra. So when we think about, well, what can we do with them, I think our heads frequently go right away to using technology for foundational knowledge. Right? How do we go help the kids learn the basics? Anytime you buy an app, anytime you have kids go Google stuff, you're helping them build foundational knowledge. But we're really finding we want to move our teachers in Auburn beyond this. Now this is great. So when I say beyond, I'm not saying we shouldn't do this. I'm saying we should do this and we've started thinking about 7 powerful uses of technology. In fact, we've started thinking of instruction in 2 parts. The first part is building the foundational knowledge. The second part is of using that knowledge. We have to do both the complex reasoning and the foundation building. In fact, I love Bloom's taxonomy, but I hate that we call it lower level thinking, because to me that almost implies it's unimportant. It's foundational. So, but also things like learning progress management. How can we make kids more independent? How can we personalize the learning? How can we leverage the technology for assessment? How can we build a stronger homeschool connection? And the first thing I want you to notice about these 7 powerful uses is the pedagogical focus, not the tool focus. It's not a tech focus. It was all about different pedagogies that we wanted. So the other thing is, we work, how many of you are teachers, classroom teachers? All right, round of applause, because God bless you. I don't know where we'd be. There is no other profession that is more important, that works as hard as you guys, and has become the scapegoat for other purposes around education. So God bless you for still walking every single day into those classrooms and working with those kids. But you know, our job is to do content. We hear a lot about testing, and we forget often about this other side to learning that we really need to pay close attention to. And it's about student engagement. We need to make sure that we're engaging kids as well. My wife is one of the best literacy teachers I've ever known, and what she seems to get intuitively is the most important thing she needs to teach her kids about reading isn't pronunciation or context, it's to love reading. And if we all spend a little more time teaching our kids to love our content first, think of how many fewer discipline problems you'd have. Go home and ask your partner, how much happier would they be if kids were more engaged in the classroom? So a year ago is a research study, a national research study. Only 4 out of 10 kids are engaged in school, in high schools. I'm not sure that's okay. You know, we're worried about the dropout problem. We're worried about kids being college and career ready. Those are noble goals. I don't know how we get there without thinking about engagement. And Tom March is one of the folks who helped invent the WebQuest approach to learning. And he says that our world is already busy engaging kids. And so we really risk being trivial to these kids if we don't try to engage them also. And sometimes I wonder if some of our classroom discipline issues and things like that are because we're teaching the way that we were taught, we were trained to teach, and that we've taught for a long time. But the rules have changed. Now we have to engage kids more, and I may not know how to do that. This isn't about blaming teachers, but it is about a piece of my job that I have control over. Maybe control with support. It's much easier to have control with support than without. But I'd also like to say that in my experience, educators misunderstand motivation. One of my hats is I did a bunch of research on what motivates underachieving middle school kids. And I'll show you the outcome of that in just a second. But the teachers will come up to me when I do motivating underachiever workshops and go, "Do you see that kid right there? He's not motivated at all. He won't do a thing I tell him." Well, that's the compliance model. And I'm not saying that kids should do whatever they want. That's clearly not what I'm saying. But motivation is really about how do we create a context where they want to learn. And you know, a part of why this is so hard is there's a lot of factors about why kids are unmotivated and unengaged that we have zero control over. And that's a reality. So this isn't about ignoring that either. But if there's 45 things that you can't control and 5 you can, what do? The 5 you can. So the other thing is it's really not about why they should. It's really about why would they want to. And there's a subtle difference here too. I didn't say what they wanted to, right? I'm not saying do what they want. I'm saying why would they want to do the stuff that we value for them, that we say they ought to do. And so at this point you're going, okay, Mike, I buy into this, but I'm really angry because you haven't told me how to do any of this. So one of the resources I'll share with you a little later is the Meaningful Engaged Learning Focus 5. These are the 5 target areas to work on that you have control over in your classroom. They include student voice and choice. They include real-world connections, learning by doing and hands-on learning, positive relationships, and the one I always forget. If you focus on a critical mass of these, the other thing is don't fall in the trap of trying one and going, my kids aren't motivated yet, and stopping. It's really about, you might start on one and get good at it, and then add a second and add a third. But it's really when you have 3 or 4 or 5 of these working in conjunction that you start looking around the room and go, Lucy, she's never done anything in this class before. Look at her, she's working. So, all of you know that it was true what I said about Lucy. So. All right, so we've got to work on engaging kids also. Another piece that's really important is formative feedback and continuous improvement. Now, traditional assessment, I think, is a lot like playing blind golf. Right? We'll blindfold you. We'll put a club in your hand, line you up, and go, the ball's there. See if you can hit it to the hole. And so you wind up and you swing. You're not even sure if you hit the ball or not. You certainly don't know where it went. But somebody leads you over to hole number 2 and says, now do it again, until you've gone through 18 holes. And then they go, Mike, we're so sorry, you got a 74. So in order to learn, kids need a clear target. They need to know what they're aiming for. They need clear expectations. They need some immediate feedback on how it went. How did I do? And that's what golf does for you, right? They got a flag out there. There's your expectation. You hit the ball, you see where it goes. And then the third piece is multiple opportunities to try it out. You want to be able to adjust as you go. I'm so sorry about that. Research says it's the single most important impact on learning is this frequent feedback with a chance to use it to adjust. And so you've heard it as formative assessment as opposed to summative assessment, but I kind of not sure that I like that term anymore. So we've started using formative feedback. I like that because it kind of takes away the assessment. Assessment has grown for me to sound like it's something at the end, but formative feedback sounds like I'm forming something. But I've got a friend who says, oh, it's not even that. He says it's feed forward. Because of the way the data, when you have a chance to use it to adjust, do these checks and adjust, check and adjust, check and adjust, that's what moves you forward. So it's feed forward, it's not feedback. Although you'll still hear me call it feedback from force of habit. So the goal is, how can we get better at collecting more data? How can we get better at using it meaningfully? How do we get good at making sure that the data we have is actually useful and not just data? And to tell you the truth, technology does this really well. All right, next piece, leadership. It's really about leadership is everything. And I'm going to slide behind. Come on, there we go. If the leaders don't get it, it just doesn't happen. And it's not just about principals, although principals are the ones who help make it happen in the building, set expectations for how the technology will be used, but the teachers are leaders too, because they're the ones who design the learning in the classroom. And they have to lead with the learning design. And there's a model that we developed based on MLTI and working with other schools that were one-to-one. And it's got a lot of pieces. It recognizes that learning is the critical component. It recognizes that the two most important things to pay attention to are teacher practice and leadership, and that there's some other critical components that are in support of those two. Or more simply, sometimes we'll just refer to 4 key strands: leadership and professional development, curriculum, pedagogy, and assessment, data and research, which we mean much less formally than you think, and the technology management. And it's a complex system. You've got to pay attention to all these parts to move it forward. And it's about working as a team. We're finding that we really need diverse teams. We need all these different perspectives. Our Advantage 24, our kindergarten initiative in the beginning, look at the positions that these people had that were on the design team, the people who helped design what this did. But that wasn't the whole committee. Look at all the community members. We had parents, school committee members, educational organizations. And the design team, they're the roll up your sleeves and work people. What are the successes and challenges we're having? What do we need to do? The other important piece to leadership is we need this clarity of purpose. And so you need to do shared vision work. How many of you have involved large groups of community members, teachers, administrators in your district to build a shared vision of learning in your district? We need to do a lot more of this. And keep in mind, too, that a shared vision trumps the right vision every time. Because you may have some really good people who designed a really good vision, but if it's not shared by your community and shared by your staff and shared by your administration, how far will it get you? And the problem with visions is we think once we've created it, we're done. No, you've totally missed the whole point of a vision. The whole point of a vision is that it needs to then be used as a compass and a filter. Your budget should be driven by your vision. Where you put your workshop time is driven by your vision. So it has to be the filter. And when you have no vision for learning, how do you know what you're going to use technology for? How do you know how to move it to the next level? Now, I'm going to warn you, I'm going to talk a little bit about Los Angeles and Miami and North Carolina that have had a bunch of troubles lately. They've been in the press a lot. The only thing I know about the troubles they're having is what I've read in the news. So I don't know, I could be completely wrong, I don't have all the facts. But frankly, when I think about Los Angeles and the problems they're having with iPads and the Pearson curriculum, I'm wondering, are you having problems because you don't have a vision for learning? I'm wondering, or is your vision of learning electronic worksheets? And is that a good vision? And I apologize because I don't know enough of the facts about that to know, but those are the things I wonder based on what I read. So the next component of an empowerment model is community engagement. And it has to be engagement, not communication. We're really good at shooting one-way communication out to parents or the community. In Auburn, we're finding that's not enough at all. We've got to bring the community in, find out what their hopes and fears are, make sure they understand how our work applies to that. So that's where our shared vision work can help a lot, because we've started to bring the community in to develop that vision with us. The business community, the neighborhood communities, the parent groups, but also the design team work. The more you can bring in parents and community members to be part of that, because it's about building a commitment and ownership of it. Now, this idea of community engagement is also about good marketing. Because remember, it's new for the community too. They haven't experienced this as learners like we haven't experienced it for learners. And I don't know about you, but how many of you deal with community members with massive, scary misperceptions about what you're doing with technology or your technology initiatives? But beyond that, we need to be marketers because we want to build support for this. And we're competing for dollars. How many of you compete for charter schools? If you're a public school, you compete with a charter school. If you're a charter or private, you're competing with public. And the dollars are getting smaller and smaller. Our city council debates on what they're going to do for the fire department, or will they do something for the school? What kind of debate is that? We ought to do both. So one way to market is to think about what problem does this solve for them. We like to tell them what we're doing and that we're excited about it, but a piece of what we need to do is help them know what problem this solves for them. And you need to think entrepreneurially, even though that's something we're not used to doing. And when you're an entrepreneur, you think about opportunities, you think about partnerships, you think about who could I involve, you think what could we do next? How can we let people know about it? And it's important that we state our case. And I've got to tell you that for winning over parents and community, you need stories. Stories win over the public. And we try to win over the public with data, and that doesn't work. We've got to win the public over with stories. Now, data is important. Data wins over policymakers and decision makers. The people who will give you big grants, the foundations. So you've got to have both. What are our stories and what's our evidence? And frankly, if you're working on an initiative, whether it's a technology initiative or some other kind of initiative, you need to name it. And you need to name it something that makes sense. This is a preschool near my home, and they're called the Kids Stop, which is a really great name until you look at their whole sign. So they're in kind of this mini mall, and I pulled in to go to another business, and I thought, I got to take a picture of this. But even think the early days of our primary grades iPad initiative, we called it Advantage 2014. We wanted to give all of our kids an advantage by the 2014 school year. So naming matters. It can help communicate this vision to your community. So it's really interesting. A couple years ago, I had a chance to go to this conference where we were talking about innovative programs. Almost every single innovative program that failed because they had failed to communicate with the community enough. And do you know the thing that we forget the most? We have turnover in parents. So let's say I've got a middle school initiative. It's going great for 3 years. Everything's going, and then we start hitting bumps in year 4. And they get really bad in year 5, and we just don't understand why until you get... We didn't do anything with this new group of parents that we did 4 or 5 years ago with our first group of parents. So you have to make sure that you're doing this communicating and refreshing it. A piece of community engagement is also honoring controversy. How many of you have had conversations with community members or school committee members that went a little like this? So and part of me, I don't blame parents because they don't have the same experiences around teaching and learning that we do as educators. And that's not a criticism, it's just an observation. And they don't have the same experiences we do around teaching and learning with technology. And so I don't know about you, but it seems to me that when we get these wild concerns from parents, they're based on supposition. And you can even kind of see their logic. But we need to, so that just means we have a communication challenge, right? We can laugh at them in private, but in public what we need to do is figure out how do we communicate the message to them to change their minds. Frankly, a piece of it may be well, look at such and such a district that's already doing this. We can understand why that would be a worry, but in fact, they have not experienced that themselves. Think of that as a message rather than saying, well, you're wrong, and here's the right answer. So validate what they say, but point them to an example. So when we were doing this school development work, we were having some real challenges in Buffalo, partly because we were the superintendent's project, our school to motivate kids, and we had not built a lot of buy-in, and the union and the superintendent were having a lot of issues, and our school became kind of a pawn in the whole thing, which was unfortunate. And one of my friends who was the director of the program was having a dinner party, and one of his friends is a pilot, a commercial pilot who was an ex-combat pilot in the military. And he said to Pat, you need to understand they only shoot at you when you're over the target. So I'm sharing that because I want you to not get frustrated because you're taking flack. I want you to go, okay, well, maybe I'm closer to being on target than I thought. And as educators, we tend to not like conflict and we tend to shy away from controversy. I'm trying to help you think about how can we move forward. Frankly, one of the most important skills you can develop is learning to differentiate between barking dogs and barking dogs who bite. We tend to be afraid of barking dogs when maybe we only need to be afraid of the ones that bite, and we need to tell the difference. What does a postal delivery person do when they have a barking dog? Walks past them. What do they do when they have a barking dog that bites? Toss the mail on the front porch. Right. Oh, apparently there's an ICE conference tomorrow. The other thing is that if you look at the there we go. If you look at the naysayers, we tend to shut them down. But what I've learned is a great strategy is listen to what they say, because sometimes they tell me that there's something that we're already doing that we haven't communicated, and they're worried about us not doing it. And I'm thinking, you're crazy, we're doing it. And what the real problem is really mine. I haven't communicated that we're doing it. The other thing is sometimes we have problems with our language. We'll call something A, and what we discover is if we call it B, we're not having problems with the community. So I think listening to the naysayers can teach you a lot about how to respond. But you only get there if you're willing to honor controversy and not just kind of move away from it. So these are some practical strategies that I hope help. The next category is how do we really protect the stuff? Because I'm talking a lot about leadership and community development and learning. But in truth, you've got to pay attention at some level to the technology itself. And we have learned lessons about how unexpected details really matter. Even little things like cases and bags. Do you have a case that protects it? Do you have a bag that protects it? How will kids transport this back and forth? These are important pieces to pay attention to. Or what are you going to do for storage? So in the primary grades, the classroom is in charge of the iPads as opposed to the kids, like it is in the middle and the high school. So how are we going to store them? How are we going to charge them? And when you're working with kindergartners, and they come in, they may not know their alphabet yet or how to spell their name. So look at the cool idea one teacher had to include their photo. So now Hank will always know where his goes because he can't read Hank yet, but he can look at and find his photo until he can read his name. And then little things like repurposing a library bookshelf so that, because we don't use the iPads all day, and kids have a place to put it. And then also things like, what are you doing for classroom management? What kinds of expectations and policies and procedures are you setting? That's really critical. So we've even had a kindergarten teacher write a song about how to carry the iPads. The fingers on the bottom, thumbs on the top, this way it will not drop. Or using the guidelines as sight reading early in the year. So kids would read those policies and procedures without really knowing their alphabet or their words yet, but it becomes a great sight reading exercise while they're reinforcing these classroom management strategies. So how many of our tech directors and tech leads out there? So these guys and women, these people play an enormous role. I use guys generically, and then it doesn't sound like I am, so I always then sound like I was only thinking about guys and added women as a second thought. So anyway, these tech people are critical to making sure stuff works, but we're finding there's differences in styles, but actually we're seeing a different impact based on style. Jeff Mao is our state tech director. He's been in charge of MLTI for a long time now. He's also a big hockey enthusiast. And he uses the analogy of hockey players. So in some districts we have, in Maine, we've got the tech directors that he calls the goalies. Their goal is to protect the stuff. I'm going to protect everything. We're going to guard everything. And then he's got the league in goals. They're the people that are out there, follow me, look at what we're doing. And then he's got the tech directors and tech leads that are league in assists. And they're the ones that just make things happen. They go, how can I help you? How can I support you? And we've had some really interesting results. There's a real advantage to having a statewide technology initiative because we know what's going on everywhere. And we can start finding patterns. Guess what? The goalies had the most breakage, the most inappropriate behavior, the most stuff go missing. So that approach did not achieve the goal that they had set. And that's a really interesting piece of data. And as you would expect, the ones that were the Yahoos and were going way ahead, they were doing great stuff. And the ones that had the biggest impact were the ones that said, how do I help you make things happen? It was about helping make things happen for teachers. The other thing that we discovered is that breakage has nothing to do with the device. It's all about teacher practice and leadership. Has leadership set an expectation that this is a learning tool and that teachers will use it for learning activities, not just for enrichment or free time? Are teachers finding ways to use it in meaningful ways with kids? By meaningful, I mean to the kids, in ways that are familiar to kids. So that was interesting to us. And so if you're a district that's having some issues with breakage, I would start by looking at your policies and procedures and how you're supporting teachers to be more engaging. But the bottom line is that what we're discovering in the tech world is teachers need to be empowered to do what they know is right. Now, frankly, you also have to support the heck out of people. We're asking teachers to do stuff that they largely haven't experienced themselves. Now, this is slowly changing, but I think we still have a big population that's that. And frankly, I think we have a moral obligation to support the heck out of teachers when we're asking them to do something they haven't experienced themselves. And frankly, we've got a lot to learn, right? When we think about all those 7 different powerful uses, when we think about how can we engage kids, and a piece of achieving those 7 powerful uses is learning new technology tools. So you can figure out how do I leverage them for learning. So what do? One of our conclusions was don't do it all at once. Cover your ears. Sorry. Don't do it all at once. So we've drafted out phases of technology integration. We think of this as our professional learning continuum for teachers. We've also, sorry, this is sensitive, it's touchy. So we started thinking about PD differently. All right, let's talk about the different pieces of this new face of PD. One is we've started thinking of workshops as same page sessions. We used to think of workshops as what you do at the beginning. If you come and attend a workshop and leave, you're ready to go forth and you're able to do it and you'll be successful. Now we think of it as it's the start. We want to get everybody on the same page. You don't leave being ready to do it successfully. You leave being ready to try it out and start to get good at it. So it's things where we'll give you models and introduce key ideas and build a common vocabulary, give you a chance, some guided practice. But attending these workshops isn't enough. You've got to go back and do. You've got to go back to do. And that leads us to the second way that we support the heck out of teachers, and that's by learning invention and tryouts. Professional development is when you and you and you and you go back and go, I'm not sure I know how to do this, but I think this would be fun. I'm going to try it out. That's professional development. And so it's when teachers invent lessons and strategies, and then they do this play, debrief, replay, where I try it out, I think about how it went, and I think about how I could do it better next time, and then I try it again. Another important piece of supporting the heck out of people is how many of you have colleagues that they hear a great idea and they're excited about it, but the next thing they say to you is, but what does it look like? And so we have to find a way to help people, and it's because we're shifting paradigms, right? It's stuff we haven't experienced before, and what we know about paradigm shifting is information's not enough. So what we have to do is get you out to see it and experience it. So we have to, part of professional development is letting people go visit other people's classrooms in the building or in other schools. Or if you can't get out, can you watch videos? TeacherTube is a great option for looking at how different people are doing different things. Or can we provide model lessons, especially if we're collaborating and working together? But when we send people out, we have to scaffold those experiences. I took a bunch of teachers from a pretty traditional high school over to a project-based learning school, and they came back going, well, those kids were out of control. They were just doing whatever they wanted. They were talking. The teacher was up in the front of the room and not doing anything. I didn't scaffold that experience for them. I didn't help them understand. Now look, when they're working on projects, it's probably going to look to you like the classroom's out of control. But what you want to do is go and talk to the kids. What are you seeing? What are you doing? Tell me what your goals are. What activity you're doing right now. And then go and stand behind the teacher for a little while they're, quote unquote, doing nothing, and look at what they're really doing. But I didn't do any of that scaffolding. So we have to help people see new things and know what to see, which leads us to coaching and feedback. Coaching and feedback is a piece of PD. And so that includes how are we going to get that formative feedback for people? How can we get through classroom observations, talking with kids, and leveraging that feed forward for teachers too? Not in a judgmental way, not in an evaluation way, not in a teacher evaluation, but just how do I get the feedback I need so I can get better at my craft? That's where a pedagogical coach or a technology coach comes in. They can co-design lessons, they can model lessons, they can team teach, they can sit in the background and watch you teach and give you feedback. But remember, peers are coaches too. How can we find time for colleagues to go visit each other and talk and support each other? And frankly, that teacher face-to-face time is another important piece of professional development. Now, I was in Scouts, and my dad taught me an unusual version of the Boy Scout oath. On my honor, I will do my best to take what I can and steal the rest. And he was a minister. But I've come to think, but isn't that our teacher's oath? Who's got good ideas that I can adopt and make my own? Who's got great lessons? Who's got good ideas that I can appropriate? It's in that sense we mean, how can we take what I can and steal the rest? That's the teacher's oath. So teachers need time to share. They need time to share ideas and resources. They need time to share successes and challenges. One of the best ways you can structure a meeting is pull people, Java-like people, maybe it's grade level or something like that, or content, and let them talk about what are your successes and challenges, because it almost never fails that as somebody shares a challenge, 2 or 3 other people go, I had that too and I tried this and it worked. Or people share successes and other people leave with good ideas that they're going to take back. You know, we're not alone. Even though our job is really isolating and sometimes, there are other people that we don't have to do it alone. We don't have to reinvent the wheel all the time. We've got to connect with others and get good ideas. Are you running into a problem? Well, how did others solve it? What did they do? And sometimes we try to invent a solution when what we really need to do is call our friend in the district next door and go, what do you guys do about this? And PLCs can be built around Twitter and Facebook and blogs. There are people in this room that I knew online long before I ever met them face-to-face and had a chance to work with them. Another important piece to professional development are these on-demand modules, because there are tools you're going to want to learn so you can leverage them for learning. There's skills and strategies you're going to want to know how to do. And just like kids, if we can build these small modules that build into something bigger that you can access on demand, we've started to think of like 10 curriculum buckets for these modules. And the first 3 are kind of like personal things, like can you use the device yourself? how are your classroom management strategies? Because I don't know about you, if you're new to implementing iPads in a middle school classroom, you suddenly discover it's really easy for kids to be doing something other than what the class is doing. Is that a problem with the device? Not until after I've tried 3 or 4 classroom management strategies. And then the other piece is, how do I manage the technology ourselves? Now, our middle school and high school kids are the authorizers on their own device, but our primary grade kids, the teachers do that. So how do they set up a model iPad? How do they sync? How do they keep things up to date? And then on top of these, we've added also the 7 powerful uses as curriculum buckets, so that we can look at teachers developing this. We've just started a project that's mostly made up of a K-12 design team in our district, but we've got all these other districts nearby that are working with us. We're developing out the system for this. What would the modules be? How do we recruit teachers to help teach these modules? Because you might be interested in teaching 1 or 2, but you'd never be willing to teach a whole course. But you'd say, I do this module in my own classroom all the time, so I'd love to be one of the people who helps show others and certify that they've learned it. And we're going to start using digital badges as a way to keep track, so that we can validate what teachers know, and we're going to look at large, medium, and small badges. So that maybe you're getting a small badge for Edmodo, someone else is getting one for eBackpack, that together with some other stuff is going to lead into a badge on managing student workflow and student assignments, which could lead into a big badge on helping kids be independent learners with technology. So that's the new face of technology, are these same page sessions and helping teachers see what it is, and the face-to-face time to meet, and all these other components. So we've talked about a lot of different pieces to this empowerment model. The focus on learning, how leadership is important and needs to be shared, the community connections, the ways that we can really protect the devices, and how we can support the heck out of teachers. And you probably know by now that no good idea ever goes unpunished. And so I've got an invitation for you. And that invitation is for all of you after this conference to go back and work hard, to be willing to move out of your comfort zone and try new things. Because this takes really courageous leadership, but leadership from everybody. I want you to remember the teacher oath and think about, where can I get good ideas? Reflect on what you're doing. Where can you get good feed forward for your own work? How can you provide good feed forward for your colleagues? I want you to be systematic, thinking about all the important pieces you need to pay attention to, including those 4 strands. And because we can't all do it ourselves, think about being a team. Network with others so you can learn from and share what you know. Become an expert, even though becoming an expert means you need to make all possible mistakes. But be willing to share what you know because others need to know it too. But mostly, please go forth and do really great learning experiences with kids using technology. Thank you.